At 11 minutes past 4 in the morning, in the frozen spruce forest north of Thunder Bay, Ontario, a trail camera set for moose captured a jaguar, an animal whose entire wild range lies 2,000 miles to the south. It was late October. A moose survey crew had bolted the camera to a spruce trunk weeks earlier, the way they do every season. Nobody was watching it live. It sat there in the cold, waiting, its lens fogged with frost, firing whenever something warm crossed in front of it. At 4:11, something did. 3 short clips. In frame after frame, a long-tailed cat moves through the frost. Heavy shoulders, a broad, blunt head, a coat marked with dark rings across the flanks. The animal doesn't hurry. It just walks through the gray pre-dawn light and out of frame, and the camera goes quiet again. When the crew came back and pulled the SD card, they expected lynx. This is lynx country. Long legs, tufted ears, gray fur. That's what should have been on that card. Instead, they were looking at a big muscled cat wearing a pattern that doesn't belong anywhere near a Canadian winter. Look at the coat closely. Those are rosettes, not the simple spots of any cat that belongs this far north. Rings within rings, each one shaped a little differently, scattered across the shoulders and back. And that pattern only belongs to one animal in this hemisphere. Panthera onca, the jaguar, the largest cat in the Americas, and the 3rd largest cat on Earth. Its stronghold is the Amazon, the flooded grasslands of the Pantanal, the tropical lowlands of Central America. Heat, dense green, rivers thick with prey. That is where a jaguar lives. The northern edge of its confirmed breeding range sits in the mountains of Sonora in northwestern Mexico. That's the frontier. Past that, the map goes empty. This camera was not near that frontier. It was a continent's worth of climate away, roughly 2,000 miles north of where a jaguar should ever be, in near freezing spruce, at 4 in the morning, in the dark. Hold that fact in your head, because everything that follows exists to explain it. And nothing quite does. A tropical apex predator, filmed in Canadian frost, belongs to no pattern any biologist has ever mapped. So, the investigators did the only responsible thing. They stopped trusting the shock of the image and started walking the evidence. 3 clips, 11 seconds total. Examined frame by frame to prove whether this was truly a jaguar at all. 3 clips, 11 seconds of footage. Analyzed frame by frame, because before anyone asks how a jaguar reached Ontario, they had to prove it was a jaguar at all. And the rosette pattern, as individual as a fingerprint, is where they started. So the biologists slowed the clips down and laid the frames side by side. They mapped the rosettes, those open rings, not solid spots, against the build, the gait, the long, heavy tail swinging through the frost. And every marker lined up on one animal, not a melanistic leopard, whose coat would swallow the pattern in shadow, not an oversized bobcat, which is far too small and stub-tailed, and not a cougar, which carries no rosettes at all. A cougar is a plain tan cat. This one wasn't. The pattern said jaguar, and the pattern doesn't lie. Then the ground gave them something the camera couldn't. In a mud seam near the base of the spruce, pressed into the near-freezing dirt, was a single clean pug mark. They poured a plaster cast of it. When it set, they measured it against every cougar track logged in the region. It was wider, not a little wider than anything on record. A cat had stood there in the pre-dawn cold and left the shape of its foot behind. And then the story got older. A trapper, 2 nights before the camera ever fired, 8 miles south, said he'd watched something cross a logging road in his headlights. His words, a spotted cat too big for a lynx. He'd told people. They'd shrugged it off. 2 nights before the camera fired, someone had already seen it, and no one listened. So now you have footage, a cast, and a witness, which is exactly when the doubts start. Take each easy answer as it comes, and watch how none of them survive contact with the evidence. A hoax? The camera belonged to a government moose survey with log timestamps nobody tampered with. To fake this, you'd have to walk a live jaguar into a remote grid at 4 in the morning and film it. That's not a prank. That's nearly impossible. An escaped captive, then? Investigators pulled private collection and zoo records across Ontario and the neighboring states. No reported escape. No missing animal anywhere. Though, to be honest, an unregistered exotic pet, someone keeping a big cat off the books, can never be fully ruled out. A misidentification? After the frame-by-frame work on that fingerprint coat, that's the weakest option of all. And that is where the case turns. Because if it wasn't a hoax, wasn't an escape anyone reported, and wasn't a misidentified cougar, then a handful of researchers were forced toward a third possibility, one far more unsettling than a lost animal, that the map itself might be wrong. Think about what that possibility actually asks you to swallow. If the cat escaped from somewhere, then whose was it? A jaguar is not a house cat. Someone would notice an empty enclosure, someone would file a report, and yet across Ontario and the neighboring states, nobody did. But the other option is worse. If the animal was wild, then a tropical cat somehow crossed thousands of miles of the wrong habitat. Frozen rivers, boreal spruce, cities, highways, and did it without a single camera, hunter, or road-killed carcass marking the way. That is not a stroll, that is a ghost walking north. So, a few researchers turned to the third answer, the one nobody wanted to say out loud: warming winters, shifting prey. The idea that the northern edge of what a jaguar can survive is not fixed at all, that it is creeping upward, quietly, faster than our range maps admit. Under that view, the animal at 4:11 in the morning isn't a mistake in the data. It's the first line of a map being redrawn. Here is where you have to be careful. Separate what is known from what is guessed, because the honest list is shorter and stranger than you'd expect. What is confirmed is narrow, and it is solid. A real jaguar was really filmed there. The rosettes matched. The build matched. The plaster cast came out wider than any cougar track logged in that region. Wildlife biologists looked at 11 seconds of footage and did not blink. On that one point, there is no argument. And everything else is open. Where it came from, unknown. Where it went, unknown. Whether it was alone, unknown. Those aren't small gaps. They are the whole story. And not one of them has an answer. Because after those 3 clips, there was nothing. The camera never fired on it again. The Moose crew left the grid running for weeks in the near-freezing pre-dawn cold, and the frost came and went over an empty clearing, and the cat never came back. No carcass, no den, no second sighting. The trapper's story, the cast, and the printed frame, laid together on one table, that is the entire case. That is why serious people are not laughing this off. One real jaguar, one plaster cast, one trapper's story. And not one person who can tell you how. No hoax fits, no escape was reported, no misidentification holds. The easy answers all bend, and none of them break clean. So, we are left with a single question, and it does not go away. Where did that animal come from, and where did it go? Somewhere in the boreal forest north of Thunder Bay, a cat that should not exist walked into frame, then walked back into the dark. Next, we follow a track pressed fresh into unbroken snow, a track that shouldn't belong to what left it.